This is Dr. David Allen coming to you on the television program, People Helping People. Well, we've just come through a monster hurricane, Irma. And of course, we are so fortunate. In fact, it's miraculous because, you know, if it had gone through our country like it did in America and Virgin Islands and Barbuda, I dread to think what could have happened. But it's still important to know that because of the tornadoes in Grand Bahama and Bimini and some of the damage people have had, it has been still a traumatic event. In fact, hurricanes have a way of really bringing our spirits on edge, and as a result, all of us are still somewhat on edge. So don't be surprised if you find yourself a little angry, a little agitated, a little depressed, because we're all a little traumatized. Then we have to stop and think of people in America without electricity, and people in Barbuda who just, British Virgin Islands, where some people are just walking around in circles feeling totally traumatized. So our subject today is traumatization. With me is Flavia, a very distinguished psychologist who is a traumatologist as well. She's doing a PhD in traumatology. And we're going to talk about what it means to be traumatized. Flavia, when people say I'm traumatized or a person is traumatized, what does that mean psychologically?
Well, when a person says they are traumatized, they're just expressing that they went through an event, an experience, that more than they could handle. So trauma is part of life. We all get traumatized one way or the other. It's impossible to go through life without suffering trauma. But the difference is that we have some resources that we are able to process trauma. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's not possible to process trauma, and then we become traumatized by the event.
For example, the hurricane passed through, we had minimal damage, although for those who were damaged, it was a minimal. Can a person still be traumatized even though they didn't have damage?
Yes. First, it's because when we hear the word that a hurricane is coming, you have to understand that people already went through other hurricane experiences. So this is one, especially last year. It was traumatizing for a lot of people, and years before also, we had a lot of hurricanes, so you have to take this into consideration. And the other thing is that you can be traumatized not only with an event that happened directly to you, but you can get traumatized by witnessing an event and even hearing about events. Especially children, we have to consider that they have less resources to deal with trauma. That's why, you know, just seeing pictures, seeing images
so,
online.
What about social media? You see,
exactly.
Social media where they send horrendous pictures. You're saying they can have virtual traumatization?
Yes. You have to be very careful, and I saw this happening and children around, and people don't realize. One thing is to get necessary information. We have to be informed.
Say that again, please.
One thing is like getting information. Yes, it's a wonderful way of getting information through social media, but it's something different when you stay there seeing traumatic pictures and traumatic things over and over again. That can be traumatic, especially because if you already went to something traumatic, and it will act like a trigger for you. Just seeing the images will be a trigger.
But Flavia, you know, a lot of the games the kids are playing on their machines, iPads and stuff, about people getting hit or shot. Is that traumatization too?
Well, I have to be careful with that because, you know, there are a lot of studies of how the games affect or not, and I'm not a specialist, but I'm just saying being overexposed to violence can bring traumatization. Mm-hmm. We know that people just work with hearing trauma or working with people after trauma, like first responders, police officers. Sometimes they are not directly involved with trauma. They can become traumatized. So trauma is not only what happens directly to you, but you can also be traumatized vicariously. By if someone really close to you suffers a trauma, you can be traumatized. Or even if you just are witness to it, or if you're overexposed to images where you can have no real, you cannot act upon it and do something about it. You're just passive there.
Now, you run our family program in the prison. Persons in prison in a very restricted environment, is that traumatizing to them?
Well, there is what we can call almost like an institutional traumatization,
Does that exist?
Yes, it exists because, whenever there is violence or threat of violence or just, and all the fear related to that, it can be traumatizing. And then there's isolation and there are other practices that can also cause traumatization, right? In institutional settings like a prison. Yeah, we hear stories.
And Flavia, people, coming out of the hurricane, what are some of the signs that a person would know that maybe they have some traumatization?
Well, the first thing is to have a diagnosis. There's difference between being traumatized and having post-traumatic stress disorder. What happens when you're traumatized, you have to wait a little bit because, as I said, trauma is part of life. So in the first month, you may be having symptoms. That doesn't mean you're traumatized. Afterwards, you're going to have PTSD. But in the first month, you're going to have some symptoms. And the first thing you can recognize is that it's not getting better with time. So you had an event.
Sorry, if you're traumatized, your symptoms don't get better with time.
No. That's one first sign that you have to be a little bit worried about. So when you had an event where you feared for your safety, and you felt you didn't really have control over the situation, you really couldn't do anything about it to gain control over it, because of its intensity, because it was surprising, because it came from a situation where you thought you're safe, or someone you thought you were safe with, everything compacts for an event to be traumatic. You have to start being a little bit concerned. You have a natural reaction to trauma, so of course you're going to have all the symptoms. But if after a while it doesn't seem like a memory, because when you have a trauma and you have resources and you go after it, what happens is that it's just a memory. You can talk about it without feeling anything special in your body. It's just related as a past experience to you. If you are talking about something that happened to you more than a month ago and your body is still reacting as if it was happening today, this is a sign that you've really been traumatized and it has not been healed.
So you're saying to really be traumatized, there has to be a time gap between the event and you're feeling traumatized?
No, I'm saying that trauma is part of life, right, and we're going to be traumatized. And if you have a trauma, you're going to see that you're going to have a lot of symptoms. What I'm just saying is that if you have the resources, it will go away after a month. More or less, it will go away. If it doesn't go away and you still feel that if it was happening now, that's where you can really start worrying that you're really being traumatized and you're not being able to process what happened to you.
So people watching what Irma did, like in the United States and Barbuda and the Virgin Islands, and seeing all the damage, can that lead to traumatization?
Yes, I think people have to be careful because, as I said, people already had trauma in their lives, and they are maybe just triggering more trauma, just seeing images and seeing trauma, not with the purpose of helping or getting informed, but just because of what you feel in your body, the thrill of hearing, oh my God, this is happening to them. People almost get addicted. I see people reacting now like that. I don't know if you heard, I hear people everywhere saying, maybe we're going to have another one. It's very scary. The situation is very, very scary. What I may mention is that we realize that fear and excitement are very similar physiologically.
Explain.
Well, we realize now that what happens in your body when you feel fear, it's similar to the same thing you feel when you're excited. That's why I think people like to go to roller coasters and see horror movies. So people can get confused with seeing images that make you afraid and become
you're
excited.
Saying to be in love is the same as being afraid?
Well, you can be afraid because you're fear and excited.
Being in love is the same feeling as being afraid?
No, it's not the same. No, it's not the same. I say physiologically, it's very close between being afraid and being excited about a situation. So this is something that people have to be a little, just ask themselves what is going on that they if they're getting confused about being afraid of a situation and being excited about the danger, right? There's a lot of excitement in danger, so people have to be a little bit careful because not everybody has the resources to be able to go through that and then continue with normal life. A lot of people can get stuck.
But if people were listening tonight and they wanted to know, am I showing signs of traumatization, what do they look for?
Okay, the first thing that's going to happen is that what happened to you will come back as flashbacks or as nightmares. Flashback is not that you remember what happened, it is as if it was happening again. You feel it in your body as if it was happening again. So you don't sometimes know that there's a trigger, but normally there is a trigger.
Is it like a dream?
It's not like a dream, but it can feel like really unreal. You can have experiences of feeling that it's not real or that you're observing it from the outside. You can have symptoms like that, but a flashback is different from a nightmare. You are awake, but it seems as if it's almost like, yes, a dream-like experience in the sense that it just comes to you without control.
Does it happen in the day or night?
It doesn't matter. It can happen anywhere. But normally there is a trigger, but people sometimes they're not aware of what are the triggers. It can be a sound, it can be a smell. Smells are very strong triggers. It can be something you see, something that triggers you, the sound of the rain or the wind can be triggers later. So this is the first thing that you can know that you've been traumatized is the flashbacks and the nightmares. And then
is that the same as having a panic attack?
Well, panic attacks are not necessarily the same things. Panic attack, right? You agree with me? It's very short in.
But when a person has a flashback, could they panic like?
They can. They can have, there's a lot of fear involved, and there is the idea that you're not in control, that your body is reacting. Although there may be part of your mind that knows it's in the past, it doesn't matter. Your impression is it's happening again. It's happening again. So people have the idea, I'm going to die or I'm in real danger. Although they can be in a safe situation, they feel it as it's happening again.
Wow. We're going to take a break as we talk about traumatization, a very important subject because we've just had Hurricane Irma. We've had a massive crime problem or murder problem for the past few years in our country. And so Flavia is discussing some of the signs of traumatization. Please listen because it involves all of us, particularly our children and how we treat our children. We'll be right back.